Hello, this is my extremely beginner's guide to tuning, and we're going to start with the most simple thing. This is the tuning shop in Tokyo City. This is the new Tokyo City tuning shop. There's a massive performance and tuning logo. When you go close to the building, this is what it looks like on the map. I'm going to zoom out. It's on this little like brick looking thing right here off the main section of the map. This is where the Godzilla Gauntlet's at. So if you can go to the Godzilla Gauntlet to get here. So first you're going to walk up, hit E, go into the tuner. Now, we're going to work our way from top to bottom. Now I'm going to go all the way to the top what's currently listed. This is the horizontal offset of a car. Horizontal offset affects how wide the wheels are. You can actually visibly see it inside the tuning shop. So if I go to max offset in the rear, which is 505, you can see the wheels stick out a lot more than they do in the front. This is beneficial for cars that need to basically have that are very short wheelbases, allow them to widen their wheelbase in the sense that it can be beneficial to make your car less likely to roll. It'll take up more space on the road, which can be treated as a con in some cases. Most of the time, it's actually beneficial to have a wider wheelbase. If you're going to go fast, you want a wider wheelbase just so you have less chance of your car flipping, from what I've learned. Next, we have the height and camber. These two can be used as cosmetic, but have actual physical effects on the car. Height, the lower your car is, height-wise, the lower your gravity is. And this is very, very crucial when building any time attack car, or any car that's going to be lots of grip. Most cars are going to be affected by height and camber. I'm going to dive into the most basic setup. Camber, less is more. You don't need 20 degrees of camber in any direction, really, on any car. I would not recommend going over 5. You're not going to need more than 5 degrees of camber on a race, any time attack build. 2, maybe even 1 degree of camber is good, because you want more grip. At a certain degree of camber, you lose all the benefits of the grip gained in these turns. And then it can be changed for the front and rear to have 2 different basically sets of the same stat. It affects how the rear wheels perform, indifferent to the front wheels. As in this one, I'm running less camber in the rear, so these maintain their grip, and they can lose grip in the corners, while the front can dig into the corners with turning a lot better than they would normally. Lowering the car, as I've said, to lower the gravity, but when you can include objects like grip, like camber, that allows the car to get around corners faster with less likely a chance to oversteer. Now we're going to do the coils. I know I'm skipping tuning, but I'm saving that for last because I want to have a nice in-depth section on tuning. So we're going to start with dampening. Dampening goes from 5 to 1,000, as you can see here. Listed. These are the numbers, by the way. These are 5 to 1,000. So dampening in its current way it works is lower dampening, more oversteer, but more acceleration. Higher dampening, less oversteer, less acceleration. So that's as simple as I'm going to go into this. Anything under 400 can be considered basically you're building a drift car. I would not go under 400 if you paid me. If I'm building a time attack car, because you're going to slide a lot more than if you went over. Just mess around until you find what's right with your car, because none of this is set in stone. What you're seeing here is just what I run. It's not perfect in any way. Now, stiffness. Stiffness is how stiff the suspension is. If the suspension is soft, the car is going to roll. Have tons of roll when you're making turns. Well, if the suspension is stiff, it's going to be very rigid and not going to roll as much. So 5 stiffness on both the rear and front will have your car have tons of roll and also be lower. So if you're building a cosmetic stanced out build, you're going to want lower stiffness so the car sits actually physically lower. While higher stiffness will have the car be less likely to roll and will sit at where your suspension height would normally be at. And if I were to lower dampening in the rear and keep it the same in the front, what I'm doing is creating rear wheels that are going to have less grip, but they're going to be more likely to put that power down. So if you have a car with tons of power and tons of torque, you want to keep the rear wheels about the same dampening as the front, so none of the wheels start to oversteer or start to spin. I've not had this problem with any of the cars I've used so far, but if this does occur, there's a simple fix of keeping the dampening the same or increasing the rear dampening. So your car oversteers, you may want to increase it by 60. Car understeers, you may want to decrease it by 60. Now I'm going to go into tuning, which is a complex mess of information. There's tons of info, but I'm going to go one by one. I'm going to break this down for you. So final gear determines how long your gears are. Higher the gear, the higher your final drive is, the tighter the gears are. So we can actually see this in action if I click the one button. The speed of my car goes from 197.37 to 166. And that's how the final gear works. And we're going to not tackle any of these stuff right here. But this is simply how fast the car goes in each gear. Now we're going to go cover gearing. Each gear on this chart right here is represented by a line and two dots. The start at the 0 RPM and then at the top of its RPM range. So, at the top of its RPM range, first gear goes 64 kilometers per hour. Now, as you can see, that gear is a 3.11. So it's a very long gear in the sense that it is a very short gear in the sense that it's a very high number. So, most gearing for most cars you're going to see is go maybe 3, 2, 1, 1, 1, 1, and then it gets lower and lower, because that is how most want to work. Well, with how I tuned this car, I had a really weird gear, and I don't use 6 gear in this car at all, basically, so I didn't mess with it much. But most cars are going to follow the pattern of lowering the number until these last 2 gears. And then this gear will basically be like just a slightly bit longer than 5th, because you're going to get squeezed more power out of these. While your first 3 gears are going to be building and doing most of the heavy lifting. So just find what gears you usually use and build. When you build your tune, build it in the fact that if you're building on like a very tight and windy road, build in your lower gears to be for those sections that are nice and tight hairpins, very complicated and tricky parts of the track, while build your 5th and 6th for any long straights on that track. Like Shirakawa is a perfect place in my opinion to show this working. First, second, and third, you may be in those gears constantly upshifting, downshifting as you enter hairpins, exiting hairpins, while 5th and 6th are for the very long straights. And this is where we go into the next section of the tuning. Great, we go into the horsepower torque curve. So torque is blue. Torque is represented by this blue line and its dots, while horsepower is represented by this red line and its dots. You may be asking, what does it all mean? At the bottom you have RPMs, which is how fast the engine's going. So at 87,000 RPMs, we go up and we make ourselves how much horsepower? 23979. Well, meanwhile, we only make 158 pound-foot of torque. Most graphs, even this one, crosses at something called the 5.2 mark. Every graph will cross somewhere around 5.2. I don't know exactly why, but that's where most graphs cross because of the formula we use. While at your lower end, you're going to have less torque. In this car, you have less torque. Most power bands, you want to have a nice even torque curve with an even power band. The power band, when I refer to a power band, I'm referring to the entire curve. An even torque curve and an even power band. I don't know if I'm using the word power band 100% correctly, but I'm using it in the sense that this is an even power band, and this is an even torque curve. The higher the torque, the more likely your car is to spin, the wheel spin. So if my torque's crazy, ridiculous high to start and stays like that, that may induce tons of wheel spin for long extended periods of time, which isn't good for speed. Well, if I have tons of power and no torque, that means my car could go that fast. It could go 600, 700 miles per hour or 760 kilometers, but you'll never be able to get there because the wheels don't turn. You need torque to turn the car. And it's a fine balancing act, but not that hard once you learn to make a proper tune. And every gear affects a car. If someone says you can just run an exact build for every car, they're wrong. You are going to take your time. You want to take your time and learn how the car handles normally and then tune it to your preferences. With this car, I took my time and tuned it how I liked it, and I love this car. It's great. While other cars may handle exactly the opposite. So this is my dummy simple guide on tuning.